Chapter 52. The next evening, it was cool, and they were sitting together in the swing on the front porch, watching the sunset. She'd come home this evening and he'd cooked dinner. He'd been unpacking things all day, but he'd been able to toss a few things in the crock pot, so he had. After eating, they'd come out to enjoy the evening air. They'd been sitting there for a while. Matt wasn't really sure how long, when he looked down at the top of her head, where it rested against his shoulder. "We've talked about mating, but we've not talked about getting married," he said, cautious. He had no idea how she would react. "No, we haven't," she said without moving. "I assumed you would bring it up when you were ready." "What do you mean?" He frowned. "Well, you were married to Connie, but knew you would never be mated to her. I thought you might not be ready for marriage again." "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." She sat up and looked at him for several seconds. She picked up his hand and held it between hers. "You loved her enough that you didn't care if you never mated. Being with her and being married to her was enough." She looked away a moment. "I get a part of you she couldn't have. I would understand if you aren't ready to marry me yet, or even if you never are. I wouldn't want you to take a step you're not ready for, or to make you try and forget her. She's part of why you are who you are." She met his gaze again. "Which reminds me. Where are all your pictures of her?" "What do you mean?" "I mean your place in Denver had pics of her all over it, and while you've unpacked other pictures, there's not a single one of Connie anywhere." "I didn't think you'd want them around." "You thought wrong." She laid her open hand on the side of his face, holding him there so he was looking at her face. "I don't have to compete with her for you. She's a part of you, a part of your past and who you are. To be jealous of her would be like being jealous of your parents or grandparents. There's no point. You loved her, so I love that she was there for you. Pull out her pictures. Keep them in your office if it makes you more comfortable, but don't feel like you have to hide her away. Or that you'll hurt me if you talk about her." "I'll remember that. I have been avoiding talking about her because I didn't want to upset you." "Don't. It won't bother me." She leaned in and kissed his cheek. "You love her. She was important to you. But I have you now and I know it." Slowly, so as to not attract her attention, he slid his other hand into his pocket and pulled out the ring he'd been carrying for the last 2 days. "So I guess you won't be averse to wearing this then?" He showed her the thin gold band, barely more than a thick wire, that had been tied into an intricate knot at the top. "Is this what I think it is?" Her hand stopped short of touching the ring held between his thumb and forefinger. "If you want it, it is." She looked at the ring, then back up at him. "You're sure?" "I've been sure a long time. I bought this in Denver, it seemed like the perfect one for you, but if you'd rather something different." "No, I like the ring, it's not that." "Then what is it?" Dread started to grow inside him. What if what she wanted was something he couldn't give her? "Well," she hesitated. "I just always imagined being asked." The weight immediately lifted from his chest. This was something he could do. "Alex." He waited until she looked up at him. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes." She leaned in and kissed his lips, then held out her hand for him to slide the ring on her finger. She started at it for several seconds, then turned back and kissed him again. Shifting, she moved to sit astride his lap as she ran her mouth along the side of his neck. Her hands crept under the hem of his shirt, inching it up as she smoothed her hands up his skin. She sighed and moved against him as his hands gripped her hips. When she tried to pull his shirt over his head, Matt pulled away. "Let's move this inside." He stood, taking her weight in his arms, and went to the door. He fumbled with the latch for a moment, but got it open and went inside. Instead of attempting the stairs, he turned into the living room and the sofa. Laying Alex on her back on the couch, he moved over her. He started at her neck and trailed small kisses and tiny nips down the side of her neck to her shoulder. He bit down. Not enough to break the skin, but enough that she felt his teeth. Alex threw her head back with a low groan. "Matt. That feels so good. You want more?" He looked up at her face. "Please, yes." Her hands fisted in the soft cotton of his t-shirt as she pulled at him. "More." He unbuttoned the long-sleeve work shirt she wore and pushed it off her shoulders. While she struggled to free her hands, he ran his hands over her torso, lightly caressing every inch before cupping her breasts and gently squeezing. Alex whimpered. Her hands finally free, she wrapped them around his upper arms and held on. He played with the soft but firm mounds for several minutes, squeezing and kneading while he found the right amount of pressure to make her back come off the sofa. Happy to discover her bra had a front closure, he popped the clasp and let the lacy cups fall to either side. He pulled one dark nipple into his mouth while teasing the other with his hand. Carefully, he worked them both until they were tight and sensitive. He blew across them, making Alex cry out before he moved down her body, licking at her soft skin as he went. He deftly unbuttoned her jeans and tugged them down her hips, taking her panties with them. She had to help a little, but in seconds she lay on the couch wearing only a half-lidded look of arousal. Watching her from near her feet, he was amazed once more at the gift he'd been given. A second chance, and a woman as wonderful as the one who lay waiting for him. He moved over her again, but her hand on his chest stopped him. "Nah, I'm not the only one losing clothes here." She tugged at his t-shirt. "Off." He stripped the shirt off and went back to her. He spread her legs wide, hooking one foot over the back of the sofa and letting the other drape off the edge as he lowered his shoulders between her thighs. She smelled so sweet, so enticing. One long lick told him she tasted the way he remembered. She tried to grab his shoulders. Her hands were hot against his skin. Licking her once more, he teased the bundle of nerves at the top of her slit. Her nails scratched at his skin. It felt good. He continued to lick and torment her, never letting her orgasm, but backing off every time she got close. When he knew his control was about to slip, he unbuttoned his jeans and shoved them and his underwear off his hips. Kicking them off, he moved back over her. "You ready?" "Yes, please, yes." She reached for him, pulling him down on top of her. "You're sure?" "Yes. Now come here." He lined himself up with her dripping entrance and sunk deep in one smooth thrust. She arched her back and screamed as her body seized, her muscles clamped around him, squeezing his cock tight. Slowly he withdrew until the tip was barely inside her, then thrust in again. She pulled at him, but he couldn't get quite the right angle he needed. "Come here." He picked her up, still buried deep inside her, and settled back on the couch. He half lay on the couch as she sat astride him. Now she was in control, but he could reach what he needed. Grabbing her hips, he guided her up then down once. She took the hint and rode him, her body still squeezing him until he knew he couldn't hold on any longer. Pulling her against his chest, he tilted his head to one side, giving her the same access he needed to her shoulder. He exploded inside her in the same instant he bit down on her shoulder, deliberately breaking the skin. There was a sting as her teeth sank into his own shoulder. Her pussy clamped even tighter around his cock, making him come again. He nearly blacked out but managed to hang on. She collapsed against him and he held her there, safe and his. There was no way he'd lose her now. A couple days later, they went to see Rebecca and the babies again. Alex wanted to hold them again, and Matt didn't mind watching her with them. Besides, they were still telling people about their engagement, and she hadn't told Rebecca or JV as far as he knew. Matt knocked on the front door of the Khan's house and waited with Alex beside him. Steve opened the door. Come on in. Rebecca's changing Samuel, she'll be right out. He waved at the sofa and chairs in the living room. Have a seat, enjoy your girl stuff. He stood looking from Matt to Alex and back for a few seconds. I'm gonna take your other half out to do some man stuff for a bit. Alex frowned for a second, then shook her head and laughed. You two go have fun. Steve led Matt out to the cabin he shared with JV, a little ways behind the main house, separated by a stretch of trees. They went inside. Sit. Steve motioned to the living room as he went into the kitchen. A moment later he joined Matt in the living room, a pair of glasses in one hand and a bottle of Glenfiddich 21 in his other. Here. He handed one glass to Matt and set the other on the coffee table before opening the bottle and pouring a couple fingers of the dark gold whiskey into each glass. Matt looked at the bottle one more time, then at his friend. What are we celebrating that you pulled out the good stuff? He asked as Steve sat in the recliner that sat next the sofa. Well. Steve picked up his glass. First off, to your mating. She's a good woman who does her best for everyone. She'll be good for you. Amen. Matt lifted his glass with Steve and took a hefty swig. The rich liquid slid down his throat, leaving behind a warm, spicy finish. And second. Steve had drank as well and now lifted his glass again. Matt joined him, wondering if maybe the other man had an announcement to make. To your impending fatherhood. Matt blinked. After the last 3 years, I didn't think you'd jump in the deep end with both feet, but I'm glad you're finally living again. Matt blinked several more times, still staring at Steve while the other man tipped back his glass. What? Steve asked, setting his glass on the table. You didn't know yet? No, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't either. He looked away, then back to Steve. How do you know already? His best friend touched the side of his nose. My sense is a bit more developed than anyone else in the clan, even the Khans, so it's possible no one else has picked up on it yet, but they will before too long. Matt looked out the window, thinking about what this meant. He felt a smile creep across his face. Suddenly he wanted to go inside and see Alex, tell her. He resisted the urge. The girls would wonder why they were only gone for 10 minutes, and he didn't want to tell her here. It should be something special between the two of them. Did I say something wrong? Steve asked after a moment. Was this unplanned? No. Matt threw his head back and drained the last of the whiskey before putting his glass down beside the other and sitting back on the couch. It's not unplanned, I just didn't think it would happen so quickly. Steve chuckled. Sometimes it works that way. He slid back in his seat and relaxed. You're not getting any younger either, when are you gonna start a family? Matt propped one ankle on the opposite knee and got comfortable. Jade's not quite there yet, and I don't want to push her. She's gone through a lot since she showed up here, and while it seems she's been mine forever, that was only 9 months ago. I want to wait until she's ready. At the rate she's going, it shouldn't be all that long. A few more months, maybe a year. I have no doubt our kids will grow up together like we did. They talked a while longer, going over things they needed to get done, making plans for the future, and insulting each other the way old friends do.